You're listening to No Early GGs.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 73 of the No Early GGs FPL Draft Podcast. And if you can detect any sadness in my voice, that is because I just watched Chelsea lose 4-1 to Liverpool, and if Darwin Núñez had any sense of where the goal was, it probably would have been 6 or 7-1 instead. Noah and I took a couple weeks off. I don't think it was really voluntary. We've been pretty busy, so we missed Gameweek 22 and we're back. I'm going to be here alone this week for the Gameweek 23 preview, sadly. So hopefully Noah will be back with us soon, but I think he has some other stuff going on right now, so I will be flying solo here. We kind of missed a lot of the transfers that happened in this January transfer window, but there aren't really that many big ones other than the ones that we've already covered in an earlier episode, that being Timo Werner. That's really the main one. Since then, there have been a couple higher profile transfers, I would say. Noah's probably really sad that Dendoncker went on loan to Napoli because he loves him for some reason, even though he's not really that FPL relevant. And other than that, Calvin Phillips to West Ham, while probably the biggest of the transfers, I would say, is not really an FPL asset either, so he's not really that relevant. Other than that, Reguilon to Brentford I think is very, very interesting. I don't think he started in this Spurs game that occurred today on Wednesday, January 31st, but I think if he gets that spot that Rico Henry usually occupies, he should be a pretty good asset for that Brentford team, especially with Tony back. Today, actually, Gio Reyna went on loan to Nottingham Forest. I'm not 100% sure what to think of this. I'm only really hesitant because as a Chelsea fan, they loaned a player to Forest and he didn't play at all. I think Reyna's a little bit more higher profile for them, but they have so many options. Awani's back. Chris Wood only played the first 45 and Awani scored. They have Alanga, Hudson-Odoi, Morgan Gibbs-White, a bunch of just different wingers and attacking players that it's going to be a little bit difficult to see who nails down that spot. But I think as an exciting new player, if you want to take the risk on him, I think that's fine. So, since it's been a while, I don't think I'm going to go over how our teams did recently. I think Noah and I did win the week before in Game Week 21. Let me just double check that is correct. But, yep, we did. Noah's team, I'm actually going to go over this because Noah's team did very well, and I know he would want to cover this. So Noah's team scored the most points in the league. My team was actually second, but his team put up 66 points. The big scorer was Gabriel with 17. Van Heck got a clean sheet, I believe. Rashford and Bernardo scored 7 and 8. Ward-Prowse scored 9. Morris scored 7, and Isak scored 6. So he's flying right now. Let me check in on how his team's doing. This might be a mistake depending on how they're doing. So they have 10 points, but he has a lot of players left. He has Rashford, Shaw, Ward-Prowse, and Tavernier left to play. It was a bit of an odd game week. There wasn't really that many high scorers, I don't think, but he still has a bunch of players left on this final day, and for me, Pickford's really the only player to say anything about for me, as well as Udogie. Were on 28 points, I believe, after bonus. So this game week's still going on, and I will be skipping this to preview game week 23 since there's not really much that I can say now to retroactively fix teams. So the first game of next game week is Everton versus Spurs. Spurs have some good fixtures. Doucouré is also out now. We saw Everton tie 0-0 with Fulham. I don't know how much of a threat they're going to be going forward, but it looked like they played like a 5-4-1. Ashley Young was out of position, so that could be interesting if you back them to keep clean sheets. Jack Harrison also seemed to be playing further forward in that Doucouré role, but Everton as a whole, I think I'm really targeting their defenders in the good fixtures. Like I started Pickford, he got 10 points, which is great. But attacking-wise, I don't know if I would trust many of their attackers even against weaker opposition. For Spurs, Maddison is back. He started today against Brentford. They came back and won 3-2. They are interesting. So we saw Brennan Johnson go back to the bench. It was Werner, Kulusevski, and Richarlison. Son is obviously still away at the Asian Cup. I do think that Werner probably will come off the bench and we'll see the regular Richarlison, Kulusevski, and Son with Maddison behind them like they were when they were playing so well to start the season. But other than that, Pape Matar Sarr has been gone at AFCON, but he should be back. And it's interesting to see what their midfield looks like when Basuma comes back as well, because they also have Bentancur and Højbjerg and Lo Celso and all those players. I do think this is a game that Spurs win. I don't know if I can really see Everton scoring, but especially with Pedro Porro and Udogie, we know they like to get forward. They're definite starts for me, but there might be better options out there than Van de Ven and Romero. Brighton play Crystal Palace. Brighton just lost 4-0 to Luton. I picked up Lewis Dunk thinking that was a good fixture. It was not, so I don't think I can trust their defenders going forward, even though their fixtures are very, very green, if you've taken a look at that. So they have Crystal Palace, then they play Spurs, not so great, but Sheffield, United, Everton, Fulham, and Nottingham Forest is good. I'm unsure if I'm going to keep Dunk. I think there are other better options out there, especially with Crystal Palace having Eze and Olise back, who are really the only players that I would necessarily want from this Crystal Palace team. They're so good, and they make the rest of the other team players on their team better, but they don't really seem to score many FPL points for them, so I don't think I can recommend Crystal Palace assets outside of those two. The next game is Newcastle versus Luton. Newcastle beat Aston Villa pretty handily. Isak went off injured. That's definitely one to watch. Him and Wilson just cannot stay healthy, and they seem to rotate a lot. We saw Murphy start in place of Almiron, which is very, very interesting. And Lewis Miley, is it time to consider him? I think it might be. I would love to get Noah's take on that because he is one of those deeper lying players that scores a couple odd goals and assists, and Noah likes those players, I think, especially if they're playing a full 90. So I'd be interested to hear his take on that. But if he continues to start, especially with Joelinton out, I think, in this Newcastle team, I think he's pretty valuable. And I would take him as a fifth mid, probably just to see those 2 points on the bench if you have somebody that doesn't play for the most part. Other than that, Luton, I want to say Newcastle have some great fixtures. Most of their important players are probably picked up, though, so I'll probably skip over that. But for Luton, Adebayo scored a hat-trick, obviously the main man. Morris back in the starting lineup, but I do believe that's because Noah Brown was out with a suspension, so I'm interested to see if he continues to start. Hard to imagine that they change their lineup after beating Brighton 4-0, so I think if Morris is available, he's probably a good pickup. For example, I might, if he was available, switch him for Chris Wood because I think Chris Wood is a perennial off-the-bench type player now that Awoniyi is back for Forest. I can't see them starting together. The real question is Luton versus Sheffield is coming up. If you have a fifth defender spot, I think I would pick them up. I mean, Doughty is the number one defensive asset for them, so I think he would be the one to go for, but I think that's only really if you have the space for them. The next game is Burnley versus Fulham. Burnley just played City today. They scored right at the end, which is always good. I think that shows that they could score against lesser teams than probably the best club team in the world right now. Amdouni and Lyle Foster are leading their line. I think if they're available, I would take them because they pretty much consistently start. There's no rotation there. And Odegaard is always pretty good whenever I watch him, but again, he's a Burnley asset. For Fulham, Willian is back, and he's on pens. I think he would be my number one pickup if he's still available for mids, especially in larger leagues. I did pick him up. I dropped Jensen for him, and he got a clean sheet point. So hopefully we see them do a little bit better attacking-wise now that they have most of their players back. But again, it's Fulham. I know I didn't really like them at the start of the year, but their fixtures are okay. They have Burnley and then Bournemouth and Villa, who aren't the best defense I think if I'm going Fulham defender here, it would be Anthony Robinson out of anybody. He seems to get forward the most. I mean, there are some games where he seems to put in 20 crosses a game, so I think he has the best attacking threat out of any of the Fulham players. Next up, speaking of Aston Villa, we have Sheffield United at home to Aston Villa. Ben Brereton Diaz is that was the transfer that I could not remember earlier. He scored in their last game. He seems to be probably the only player that I would potentially have from the Sheffield United team. Archer might be up there too, but I don't think he's been starting pretty consistently, so I think their big signing is Brereton Diaz, and he's probably the only player I would own from the Sheffield United team. The other question is, this Aston Villa back line, Diego Carlos didn't play, Cash is back. Powell re-injured himself, so if you really want to get in on this Villa back line, I do think that Longley is the way to go. I would have to take a look at their fixtures, and I can do that right now. They have good fixtures too, so Sheffield United next week, as well as Man U, Fulham, Forest, and then Luton. That's great. So I think Longley might be the number one defensive pickup, depending on Powell team news, but Powell injury news, but he does have an unknown return date right now. Noah and I have debated this before as well. Is Douglas Luiz the best midfield option on Villa? And I think he is now. We saw Bailey not start. He did assist, but there's too much rotation in there, and Douglas Luiz starts every game and is on their penalties. They have the players that can draw those pens. I think he's their best midfield asset at this point. Next up, Manchester United versus West Ham United. This game, I can see it being low scoring, but I think it's like a 1-1 low scoring where both teams do not keep a clean sheet. We saw Anthony score a goal, and I think he got an assist against Newport County. Is he back? Probably not against better teams. So I'm still not considering him at all. I do think Garnacho is still their best asset. For West Ham, I'm definitely starting Bowen and Kudus. I'm very interested to see with their injuries if Cornet starts again. He did score in their last game. I'm fearful that game week 22 might be his last game week starting. Kudus is back from AFCON, so I don't know. Interested to see because Cornet lit up the Prem when he transferred to Burnley that one season, so I think he got like 7 or 8 goals that season, so he would be a great pickup if he consistently starts, and I'm not sure where he has been, but he definitely can put FPL points up, so I would watch him to see how he does in this next game against Bournemouth on tomorrow. Chelsea versus Wolves. Wolves just beat Chelsea a couple weeks ago, it seems like. Chelsea cannot keep a clean sheet. I still have Gusto and Petrovic. I'm probably starting Petrovic because Pickford has a terrible, terrible fixture. And other than that, I don't know. Chelsea are just a mess. Would I rather have Chilwell or Gusto? Probably Gusto at this point because Chilwell cannot play two games in a row at a time. And I would really back Pedro Neto to score in this game as well. And I think I would happily start Cunha, Neto, Sarabia, whoever's available for Wolves, attacking-wise. Bournemouth versus Forest is next. Awoni's back. If he's available, you should pick him up because he is a very dangerous attacking striker, and as Noah always says, those are hard to come by. I would imagine that Chris Wood's time is up, and I thank him for his service. He got me that hat trick, but he seems to be a bench forward from now on. I'm very interested to see how Bournemouth do again in this West Ham game, so I'm a little bit hesitant to comment, but Solanke is always a starter. Tavernier probably also, but I don't think I would start their defenders. I think their good run is over. They lost to Liverpool 4-0 the last time we saw them play, so in the Premier League, I should say. So I do think that I'd be a little bit apprehensive to start other Bournemouth options going forward until they show that they can turn it around. Last two games we have are Arsenal and Liverpool. I don't think I would start defenders in this game. I think both teams are going to score, and neither of these teams really have anybody on waivers. We did see ESR start the last game for Arsenal, so if Emile Smith-Rowe is available, maybe look at him, but I don't think he'll be starting consistently. We've seen Havertz and Trossard and Nketiah, all these players rotate for Arsenal, so I think I would probably stay away from him. but Arsenal and Liverpool both have the usual suspects. Salah is still injured even though Egypt were eliminated, so my team's going to have to survive without him for a little bit longer. Lastly, we have Brentford and City. I don't think I would start anybody from Brentford outside of Tony, although Maupay, I believe, has generated a goal and assist in his last 2 games, but I just can't trust him, especially against City, so Tony is probably the only Brentford player I would play. Is Haaland back is the real question. I think he probably will be for this game, which is great because I am playing against him, so I do think they will be dominating this game as well, just like they did against Burnley today. So, I don't know. Just the City players, there's never really anybody available for them, and you have to guess who starts. In terms of best defensive fixtures, I would rank Newcastle number 1. I do think that Aston Villa are number 2, and City are probably number 3, with Tottenham at 4. Those are really the ones that jump off the page, but in terms of starting defenders and choosing who keeps a clean sheet, those would be my number 1 picks. I think they might be a little bit obvious. All right, I think that's going to do it for this quick episode of the No Early GGs FPL Draft Podcast. Hopefully we get Noah back soon, but as always, you always remember, it's been a little bit since we've said it, but no early GGs.
You're listening to No Early GGs.